Summer fun came to an end one September morning when Andrew, Bridget, Cece, and I donned our Bonine jumpers. These were the sweaters made from the sheep's wool that was so heavy and durable it was almost waterproof. Strapped on our book bags and went back to school. In South Bend, our school was a 2-story brick building with lots of teachers. In Kilmacanogue, it was a 1-story building with 3 classrooms, 3 teachers, 7 grades, and about 60 students. We were spread over 4 grades in 2 of the classrooms. Bridgie and Cece were in the first room in senior babies and junior babies, the equivalent of kindergarten and nursery school. Andrew and I were in the middle room in 3rd and 2nd grades. Our teacher, the master, frightened me. Corporal punishment was very much in vogue, and children who ran afoul of any rule were called up to the front of the room and hit with the big long switch he kept near his desk. The desks in school were double ones that we each shared with a classmate. We wrote with pens carefully dipped into the built-in inkwell, then even more carefully drawn across the page, and then blotted. During my first week in school, I was laboriously writing in my copybook when my seatmate leaned over to show me something and accidentally brushed her sleeve across the page. I hadn't had a chance to blot it yet, so my work was smudged from top to bottom. She was wearing a pink sweater and her sleeve was stained with the ink. We stared at each other, then at her sweater and my smudged page as the master paced around the room, his footsteps getting closer and closer. When he saw the page, he called me up to the front of the room, had me hold out my hand, and hit me with the switch. I tried to explain that it was an accident, but he wouldn't listen and switched away. I sobbed all the way home. Andrew tried to console me. "It's not your fault," he assured me. "Everyone knows the master drinks. I can even smell the liquor on his breath." Neither of us could recognize the smell of liquor, but he just wanted me to feel better and stop crying. Dad went into school the next day, and he and the master stepped outside the classroom to speak. The master apologized, saying he should have realized the American children were not accustomed to such discipline. "But it's the only thing that works on the rest of them," he added. "They'll tear the place apart if you don't keep them in line." And with that, he opened the classroom door, and Dad looked in to see the whole class doing just what the master had predicted. Well, maybe they weren't quite that rambunctious. Understandably, I didn't want to go back to school, so a compromise was reached. I would move over 1 room and down 1 grade, which solved another problem too, my ability to keep up with the 2nd grade work. Back in South Bend, 1st graders still learned how to print, but in Ireland, they were already using cursive. I accepted the demotion happily. Dad often drove us to school in the morning, along with Mark and Alan, who lived on the farm just below Valclusa. Occasionally, Jack the postman would give us a ride in his Volkswagen Bug. Sometimes he would stop along the way in Ballybon to pick up a classmate who, for no apparent reason, we girls had taken a dislike to, and we didn't want to sit next to him. So the 3 of us squeezed into the far back luggage pocket of the car, leaving him the entire back seat to himself. It was a pretty tight fit for us, but this way we didn't have to sit next to the poor fellow. In the afternoon, Mark and Alan's father would usually pick us up, but when he or Dad were busy, we'd walk home. These walks were usually punctuated with Bridgie falling down and skinning her knee and crying. getting no sympathy from us. We'd get home and announce to Mom, "Oh, she skinned her knee again," and she cried all the way home. One day, the curate from the parish in Enniskerry stopped and picked us up. When he got back to Vaucluse, he went in and spoke to Mum. "Now, Mrs. Judge," he said, "I want to tell you that it's not such a good idea to have the children walking home by themselves." "Oh, but Father, it's good for them to walk sometimes," Mum told him. "And Andrew makes sure they get home safely." "Well, we have this fella around the area," he told her. Well, it turned out that the fella was a flasher, and the locals tolerated him. They just made sure to keep their children out of his way. We didn't walk home very often after that, which was a great relief to us, since it was a 3-kilometer walk from Kilmacanogue back to Vaucluse. In school, we were taught Gaelic, and I learned to count to 10. Ein, do, tree, cutter, cuig, and so forth. I was called by my Irish name of Mara Nicbrehan and learned where that name came from. Judge was one of the Irish names that designated the profession of those who bore it in olden times. In the ancient Celtic civilization, the judge was the most revered man in the kingdom after the chieftain. It is not known which particular Brehon gave the name to our Judge family, but their ancient homelands were in County Sligo, which is where Grandpa Thomas Judge was born. There were many other new things we learned in our little village schoolhouse. In the first grade, they taught us to knit, and I labored over my little squares of yarn until I got them right. When I got home from school, I would bring my knitting down to the kitchen and sit by the fire so that Mum could help me. Bridgie then learned how to knit from watching me, and eventually I could advise her as to the difference between knitting and purling.